All right, Pastor Moore, thank you so much for joining us on a special episode of Que Madre. We are focusing on fathers due to Father's Day, which just happened last Sunday. And you being an amazing father and having an amazing father, just thought you would be a perfect person to interview. So I also just have really enjoyed serving on the board of Clue with you and wanted to know more about you and more to share with our audience. So thank you, Pastor Moore. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. It's a quiet Saturday afternoon, and I'm relaxed.
Okay. And how did you find yourself being on the path to becoming a pastor? Can I ask you that?
Yeah, because it wasn't what I was planning when I was going to, when I was an undergraduate, hadn't crossed my mind. And then I, somewhere around when I was 19, no, about 20 years old, a lot of churches in different cities would invite me to talk to their youth group. And so I would go and do that. And then after a while, not just the youth group, but everybody. And so it kind of crept up on me.
So just from talking to the youth, how did you get fame where everyone wanted you to come talk to their youth?
I don't even know because we didn't have internet. Word of mouth. Yeah.
Okay. And through, so did the activism happen before becoming a pastor or after?
After.
Okay. And what was that like?
Well, let me take that back. There was mild activism when I was a teenager. I supported, walked out when our high school student body, well, not the whole body, but the Latinx members, the Chicanos and Chicanas, they walked out. Mecha walked out, and so I mean, those things got me, started getting me excited, but I wasn't really that excited yet.
And where was this?
This was in Oxnard.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
grew
where
up.
you are now?
Pardon?
Is that where you are now?
No, I'm here in Goleta right now. I mean, this is where I live, but I went to school in Oxnard. I grew up in La Colonia. Yeah.
Nice. I live in Oxnard.
Oh, where?
The historical district side.
Which side is that?
Like on F Street, what they call Candy Cane
Oh
Lane.
yeah, I know exactly. Yes. Yeah. I used to, when I was a kid, I went to the school that became the hospital that is now a convent. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
I
talking
just
about, right?
went there for Christmas. They always have a sale there of like little crafts and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Well, it was my elementary school.
What was it called before?
Brittell School.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting area. The other day I was taking a walk, just having a phone call with a couple of my friends, and it got to this part of the conversation where I just felt like, okay, let me sit down for a little bit because this is important and I wanted to really pay attention. And so I sat down, and it was like this little brick ledge at the end of someone's lawn, and I was probably sitting there for a total of 3 minutes when this older white lady comes out and she said, "How would you like it if I sat on your lawn?" And since I was in an important part of the conversation, I didn't want to deal with it, so I just walked away. But it's just interesting. There's been a lot of interesting situations the last few weeks. It feels like some folks are having a really hard time. For example, today I went to the Lompoc Federal Prison protest about what's happening with the COVID-19 cases over there, and folks turning a blind eye to that. And I had a Black Lives Matter sign on my car, and I was on my way out, was gonna take a turn out of a 7-Eleven, and this guy starts yelling at me like obscenities, and I was not sure why he was yelling at me because I was just waiting to take a turn out of a 7-Eleven, and then I remembered, oh, I have a Black Lives Matter sign on my car, so.
It's kind of nice that nowadays we're not quite as explosive, volatile around Black Lives Matter. Um, so you could even forget you had it in your car for a moment. There was a time you pretty much had to be on guard every second, no matter where you were. But the person who accosted you, that was today. First, let me say thank you for representing at the Lompoc Federal Penitentiary, and thank you for sporting that BLM sign. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Um,
You were talking about Oxnard, growing up in Oxnard.
yeah, I went to elementary school there. I went to Channel Islands High School. Then I went to UCSB. I had a lot of support and help to get there because nobody in our family had ever gone to, you know, to college, to a university. And so I needed a lot of help. I had an amazing high school counselor who basically adopted me in a sense, put me alongside his sons. But I give even more credit to my dad because he paid the bills. But our family didn't even know how to how to get into college. You know, the mechanisms weren't in place for people living in La Colonia. Yeah.
So tell me about what it was like growing up black in Oxnard.
You know, I'm well aware of how an urban in cities like Los Angeles, of the divide between black and brown these days. I think I think the reason behind that, I think there are a couple of reasons, but one of the main reasons is the prison industrial complex that generates that kind of division and replicates it in society. But that's a whole other subject. But um, um, now I lost my place again. Uh, where was I? I was reminiscing about um, my neighborhood and everything. And where was I? I don't remember.
Well, you can share whatever you'd like to share. You can talk about your dad. You can talk about what it was like
Okay.
becoming a dad yourself. I know you're a grandfather now, right?
Yes, I have an African American Latino's grandson. Um, so growing up in Oxnard as a young African American, oh, I know where I was going with that. When I talked about how the cities show a real divide now and traceable to the prison industrial complex, among other things. But when I grew up in Oxnard, we as black and brown people were just as close as we could be. I mean, my first date she was like a sister. She lived next door. Her name was Natividad. And we were like brother and sister. And then I found out to go to the Letterman's banquet, you had to have a date, or you were supposed to. At least that's what everybody else was doing. So I remember going over to Navi's house and knocking on the door, and her mom answered, "Can I talk to Navi?" And all the whole thing, Navi, I need a date. And she goes, "Ew." uh, but it was, we were such friends. We played kickball and baseball and tetherball and all of those games. And there was never any conflict between us other than the same kind of conflict that happens between any kids. Yeah.
That's beautiful to hear about. Yeah, and thank you for offering your services online. It's been great to be part of them.
Thank you for attending. We're a forward-thinking, activistic community, which doesn't always churches don't always look like that. We understand that, but that's who we are. I mean, we can't have all these people in our church who are activists and not be activist-minded.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Catholic, but really for me, the important part is getting the real message of, for me, Jesus was a revolutionary, he was an activist, and that's when I'm looking for services, I'm looking for places where I can really feel that, and that's really openly talked about instead of like more of a hidden message. So that's why I have found my way to your services as well as Reverend Julia Hamilton's services.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been checking both out.
Yeah.
And Pastor David Velasquez actually in CARP is pretty good about that too.
Okay. I don't know him, but Julia and I are very good friends.
Yeah, I just saw her. She was at the prison protest today.
Yes.
She spoke there.
Again, thank you all for doing that. We at our age, we're just really being guarded right now.
Yeah, and that's important and that's real. So highly respect that because
Thank you.
you're doing your part, from everywhere that you're at. And you obviously spoke at the May 31st big protest that we had over at the Sunken Gardens. So I was like, how am I going to go after Pastor Moore? Because you really brought it. Um, so yeah, I really have always been just so inspired by you and just the way you go about your life and the way you respect people. Um, yeah, it's just really beautiful to see.
Yeah, I am actually becoming my dad because, speaking of dads, but let me say this about the rally on May 31st. Um, I had told our Healing Justice BLM group that I wasn't going to be there. I didn't feel like it was safe for me to be there. And then I talked to Diane, my wife, and said, well, we could just sit in the car and listen. But we were parked so far away we couldn't hear anything. And the crowd was so big we couldn't see anything. So I decided I would make my way a little bit closer. And I got closer, and next thing you know, I'm on the stage, supporting all of you amazing women, which was an honor, but it was not planned. It just developed on its own, if you will.
So that was off the cuff. You didn't even plan that?
No, no.
Wow, that's even more impressive. I know from what I was planning on saying, I only said like a small percentage of it because I just felt called to have like a very personal conversation with who was there because it felt like everyone was just in that space where very honest communication was the way to go, and it's the way we should always go, but I just felt like people were ready for that. And just to see over 3,000 people show up,
Yeah,
it really meant something to me because I have to admit that I've never felt safe as a brown person in Santa Barbara.
yeah,
And yeah, it was really beautiful to see that solidarity. And then very saddening to see what happened later on,
yeah,
which we're still trying to, I guess, find remedy for. But
yeah,
it meant a lot to have that many people out.
yeah.
What was
Yeah.
your experience of that day?
Hmm?
What was your experience of that day, other than delivering a phenomenal speech?
Yeah, that was just part of the whole montage of amazing presentations that just seemed to come from a very deep place. It seems like the our moment in history actually brought this out, called for this response. And who knew that many people were going to show up? But something is happening culture wide. As a pastor, I would say the spirit is moving. So this is what I see happening. I see the spirit is moving, and we're being drawn into the presence of Creator.
So we should all just go with it, right?
Go with it. So I was saying earlier that I was becoming my dad. My dad became the most beautiful man that I've ever known. Even though when we were little, um, not that he wasn't violent, he didn't drink, but we were more afraid of him than we loved him. You know, but then as time passed, he began to melt and became very gentle and tender. I think one reason is I think there are a couple of reasons. One reason I think that maybe he got that from his family growing up, some of that, but I think a big factor was being in the military. So my dad was, we had to have our hair short a certain way, and our beds. He would go and check our beds like we were in the military, and check for dust on the dresser and all that kind of thing. And we were kind of afraid of him. But again, he was transformed, and just the wisest person. So I would tell my dad on occasion, I would say, Dad, there are three men who live in my consciousness: Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, and you. And he would say, oh, no, no. And I said, no, because you're the one that I actually know who is like the other two.
Yeah, I didn't know how you felt talking about your father because it's still pretty recent that he passed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to know more about that if you're open to it, but also if
Yeah.
it's too hard, that's okay.
Well, no, it's not. In fact, I don't. I don't carry a great sense of loss. Um, it's been over a year now, and I've always felt like I was being empowered by his memory. Um, I was thinking, the way we pray publicly, um, when in a church setting, sometimes people say, our great God, or God our Father, or Father God, or Heavenly Father when they open. And to me, I never was comfortable with anything until I stumbled upon recently God of our fathers and mothers. And I felt it go through the generations, you know? I felt like the struggle of my parents made more sense, and their parents made more sense in my body right now to call upon that God, their God. Yeah.
That's great. And can I ask what was it like you becoming a father? How did that change you?
Well, I'm the father of one daughter, the eldest, and four boys. And I remember the moment. I mean, I was in the room for each of the births, and the first one really stands out. Um, you know, and I did. I had this actual sensation. I watched the baby come out. I watched the doctor take the baby and suck the fluid out. I watched the doctor hand the baby to a nurse, and she washed and wiped the baby down. And then the nurse handed it to me, and I thought, "Whoa, there's nowhere else to." This is I'm the last person in line, and it was just that I think I grew up in that moment. It was like I was just standing there watching everybody else take care of the baby, and it's like, oh man, this is my baby.
So a big sense of responsibility.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
And do you have any tips to share with our listeners about that journey and becoming a father? And
I would say to fathers who have children still, I would say either find a mature, beautiful man who's the age of old enough to be your father, um, and be in their presence with your kids, because it will it will affect the way that you treat your kids to see how a mature person, like a grandfatherly type, treats the kid with much more gentleness sometimes. Um, and I'll give you an example. My son Matt, uh, when he was little, like 2 years old, 3 years old, he used to go and find my books, and he'd get his crayons or whatever and just start writing and turning pages and writing and drawing things. And then I'd walk in the room or something, and I'd have to stop him, and he did that pretty regularly. And I kept saying, Matthew, you can write here, you can't just go to my books. So one time we were at our church, and we had a men's Bible study, and my dad was there. And so I'm like, at that time, I'm like late 20s, and dad was late 50s, late 40s. He was 20 years older. Okay, so late 40s. And I remember we were having a conversation, and I looked down at my little boy, and he was going through this very expensive Bible, and he was just writing things, and it was a gift, and I was like, "Oh, Matthew." And my dad said, he's only trying to be like you, because he sees you reading and he sees you writing, and he thinks he's imitating you. And my thought was, where was this dad when I was little? But he influenced me as a more mature dad, and he continued to in so many ways. So I would say it's really important for for fathers of young children to have older men.
Yeah, what is it like being a grandfather? Because I feel like my dad was a certain way with me, and I was definitely like, I don't know, his favorite. But even with my daughter, it's a whole other level. Like she has him wrapped around her little finger. And
Yeah.
just to see that level of love, yeah, it's really heartwarming. So has it been different being a grandfather from being a father?
Yeah, it's well, as you get older, you start seeing all the things you should have done or you could have done. And so when you're old enough to know those things, then you want to give that away. So that's the way I think I treat my grandkids way better, than my kids because there was an element of fear. I'm always protecting. So you have all of these rules, these high walls you can't climb over in life. um, because the parents are looking out for their really the well-being of the child to the best of their understanding. But sometimes the parents' understanding is so immature and limited that the kids don't know the difference, and so they see their parent treating them this way. The parent thinks they're doing the right thing, but the kid feels it. The kid knows in his heart, they know that this is not right. We've all been through it, and we're trying to figure out, why is my mother talking to me like this? It doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel right. Well, as a grandparent, you take in that picture more. And you, when maybe about 2 months ago, I don't know if you were part of this service, but 2 or 3 months ago, our guest on Zoom was Cheryl Bear, the Indigenous woman.
Oh no, I missed that one.
Okay. So Cheryl, she says there's a word, you have to get decolonized in order to do this, but there's a word in her language um, for the Great Spirit, for God, but it's the same word as grandfather. Yeah. So she said that the missionaries tried to get that out, all of that thinking, that native thinking out of their minds, but then and turn them into Christians. And so she did become a Christian, but then she started to get educated. And so she started rejecting the colonial notions that were given to her. And she went back to talking about why God to her is grandfather. Because she said there were a couple of experiences. She said one time she spent the summer at her grandparents' house, and she was 16, and she went out and she stayed out almost all night. And she was so afraid of what was going to happen when she got back to the house, and she opened the door and she walks in, and her grandfather's saying, "Oh honey, I'm so glad you're okay." Not many dads would do that. Right. But it so deeply impacted her, so that when she went on her quest, she wanted to validate the fact that God was her grandfather.
That is so beautiful. I'm gonna keep that with me forever.
I
Gloria
am.
made me a drawing right now.
What am I looking at?
Gloria just made me a painting drawing.
Gloria, Gloria, are
He
you an
loves to
artist?
draw things. He's calling you. Do you want to come say hi?
Hi, Gloria. Are you an artist?
Mm-hmm.
It, I can tell. I was just looking at some of your work. So keep going. All right?
Okay.
Keep drawing. Draw from your heart. It looks like you do that already, but always remember, draw from your heart. All right, Gloria? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you, Pastor Moore. Well, just before we close out, I would love to ask you how you feel about like being on the board of Clue and the organization and the direction that we need to go from here with everything that's happening in the community.
Yeah, it seems like in an evolutionary sense, Clue is, really doing its best to stay on top of of things and responding to where we are. I haven't been active for over a year. Well, since my dad died, and I stopped. I notified people that the presidents of these groups that I just wasn't there. So I stepped away from board activity in a number of organizations and other volunteer work. And I still feel like right now I am processing everything. This new phase in life as being really the patriarch in my family, because I'm the oldest of 9 kids. My mom is still living. She has advanced Alzheimer's. And so I'm taking in where do I fit career wise? I'm coming to a place where it's possible that a change is in the offing. I don't know. But the main thing I wanted to do is make sure that whatever I do, that it really gives me energy, that it sustains me, so it's not a chore every day, right?
That's so important, and I really value you taking that time, because if you're not good, then you're not going to be able to help anybody else, right? And that's a very hard lesson to learn that I'm just now learning myself. So really appreciate just you leading by example in that way, because it's very impactful. I think it's part of what started getting me to think about just my life and being able to have some kind of balance with my daughter. And I take her with me to everything I go. She's like my sidekick, but at the same time, I also want to give her time where it's just her and me and like doing whatever she wants to do. But yeah, thank you for everything. And thank you for your donation to La Casa de la Raza. That was
don't bring that up.
I just want to say thank you, because it does mean a lot. We've been facing a lot of hard times, and sometimes it's during those hard times that you look around and you wonder like who's really got your back, and you've been one of those people that has. So thank you.
Of course. We're teammates. We're working together. We're family, right?
Definitely. Speaking of family.
One of the things I appreciate about Native peoples is that they call everybody their relatives, right? They not only call people relatives, but the rose bush and the daffodil and the bee and the elephant, they are our relatives. I just love that. So, somos familia.
Para siempre. Thank you so much, Pastor Moore, for giving us some of your time. Really value it, and just hope to continue to see you active in the community. And I'll try to check out your service every week as much as I can.
All right. Don't be shy when you come.
All right. Have a beautiful day.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.